Welcome to week 6 of Fingerstyle Foundations. I'm Jim Deeming with JamPlay.com, and I hope you've been following along with all of the components we've been doing up till now, because we're going to build on several of them today. And I'm going to introduce you to a topic that's going to use both the metronome that we learned about last week, palm muting that we learned about the week before, as well as your alternating thumb and finger techniques. What I want to do today is talk to you about syncopation, which is the idea of playing something either just ahead of or just behind the beat. As before, like we've been doing all along, your thumb is going to continue to always play on the beats, on the quarter notes. If you remember, when we're counting out loud while our thumb is playing, we count in 4/4 time, we count quarter notes this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to keep doing that. And we're going to go back to that exercise where we played a chord with 2 fingers underneath that alternating thumb. And we're going to add our palm muting on the thumb beats. But now what we're going to do, instead of just playing a chord on beats 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to take that thing that we're playing on beat 3 and we're going to break it up a little bit. The fingers are actually going to play just a little bit ahead of the thumb on beat 3. So instead of this all together, the fingers are going to come in a little early and split it up. So there's da-da, 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 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4. I'm counting it with an and, but it's not really a true eighth note because we're playing it even closer to beat 3. It's a tight, close together pop of 2 different notes. And the thing that's important here is your thumb is not coming in early. It's your fingers. And this is why the palm muting is important. Palm muting with both hands. Remember, we talked about muting the thumb notes with your palm, and then to make a little crisper sound on that chord, I'm playing it and then letting go a little bit with my left hand to deaden the sustain. So what we want is a nice So let's go ahead and take a look at page 1 of the tablature for this week. And the way I've broken this out is we start on an E chord, and just like we've done all along, line 1 is getting your thumb going. Okay, a couple of measures of that, and you would set your metronome to that. I'll do that here in a minute. And then on line 2, I'm adding a chord on beat 1. And then on line 3, you'll see suddenly there's an eighth note that your thumb is still doing the same thing. If you looked at only the thumb notes on line 3, don't get it confused. The thumb is doing exactly the same thing before. But so look at line 3. First is the chord, then the thumb beat, and then it looks like, because of the way that tied together, the chord is right after beat 2. But the feel I'm really looking for is right before beat 3. The tablature tool I had didn't really give me much of an option on how to indicate this without making it look much more complicated than it really is. But that'll show you what the right and the left hand are doing here on line 3. So line 3 is what we're after today. When I go on from there, all I'm doing is changing chords for you. We'll do E, A, and B7 just to keep it in key of E. But this is your exercise now, is to get that thumb going. Play one chord on the downbeat and another chord ahead of the downbeat. to the A chord, it's the same thing, only now our thumb pattern has changed, right? Playing the same 2 fingers though here. And then the B7. And if you're having trouble feeling that, what you might try doing is tapping it out on your knee with your hand, and what I'm after is da, 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 da. So 1, 2, 3, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Or double tap that if you need to feel it. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. You need to be able to feel this because it's not exactly split in even eighth notes like the sheet music shows there, okay? Now what I want to do next before we take some questions is I'm going to show you how I'd like you to practice this with the metronome, because this will tell you whether your thumb is staying where it should be. That thumb, I'm at 75 beats per minute right now. The thumb should not vary from this tempo. Remember, we're advancing the timing of the fingers, not the thumb. If you advance both, then you don't get the same effect. Let's try this. It's a little bit hard to do that one that slow because that syncopation makes you want to rush it. Even me. Let me bump this up to 80 and we'll do it again. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mine even got better when I did that last thing I told you about, which is when you're working with the metronome, also remember to tap your feet. When I remembered to do that, it cleaned it up a little bit. You've really got to focus on feeling, staying in the pocket with your thumb. And tapping your foot will help you do that. I'm going to check with Chris and see if we've got any questions yet so far on this. No questions. Okay, now I'm going to, you've got the information you need tablature-wise to do everything I just showed you. But for additional study, I want to put in your head the idea that you could take some of the other things that we've done, including finger patterns, and syncopate what your fingers are doing with some patterns, like maybe our G chord. You might remember that we did an alternating thumb on a G chord, and then in between each bass note, we added a finger. But instead of playing this really straight time, which would sound like this, now is those notes that the fingers play are going to be just, we're going to hold them back just a little bit. you'll hear is it almost sounds like those notes are barely leading the next bass note. So here's your bass note. Let me get it right. Hear the difference between this and this. This is straight. This is syncopated. Oh, come on. All that's really happening is that the finger's notes have moved closer to and almost immediately before the following thumb note. Okay, so you can take this technique with any of our finger patterns, whether they be chords or whether it's finger patterns. Now, what makes this work on finger patterns and sound a little better, you'll hear that I'm emphasizing that that third note, that open B string that I'm playing it just a little bit harder. That also provides a little bit of the feel. It's the syncopation that is the rhythm of it, but by emphasize your downbeat and then that note right before your alternate bass. So that's an example of how the syncopation can work with your finger patterns as well as your chord patterns. No questions yet, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the homework then. What we're going to do is, with your metronome, take as many of the different chord and finger pattern exercises that we've done and experiment with not only the one that I wrote out for you this week with the chord patterns, but go back and look for tablature that you can use, and instead of playing it straight like it is, pick one note, one of the finger-picked notes out of a measure, and try syncopating it right ahead of the following bass note instead of playing it in straight time, and see if you can get the feel with it. Again, I can't stress enough how important it is to do this with your metronome so that you stay locked in. Anytime we do something that feels like it's speeding up, playing two notes closer together like we're doing now is going to give you a tendency to rush the tempo a little bit, and it's important to have the metronome in hand to keep you from doing that and developing bad habits. And if there's no further questions, that's all I've got for you this week, and I'm going to open the floor one more time just in case there's any late arrivals that have questions. Looks like we might have one.
Well, I have a question.
Chris has a question.
I'll go ahead and ask one. Maybe we can get some others here. So when you're doing the syncopation, like I know for me when I'm trying to do that, just where my head's at as far as am I focusing on the downbeat or on the syncopation? Like how do you get around that hurdle of being able to split your brain, so to speak?
That's a fair question. I think I would have a couple of thoughts on that. One is with your thumb locked into the metronome. I guess I could say that that's where you want your head to be, is on that downbeat. Maybe what you want to think of is your foot and your thumb are locked into that. Get that foot going on that downbeat, either every other downbeat or all four of them. You can tap on every beat, or it's probably more common to tap on beats 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, especially with that finger pattern that I introduced, where I told you I was emphasizing a syncopated note, making it a little louder. I think then my mind starts to focus on the emphasized notes more than the downbeat. So that is a little bit of a change up. Because those emphasized notes are really the mile markers that are establishing the feel of this pattern that we're doing. But I think what I would do, if that's tripping you up, what I would focus on is that syncopated note and the beat right after it, the thumb note. Spend some time just practicing that double tap right there. Da-da, 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 da-da. Add another note around. Maybe you add this many notes. Repeat that right there. Because up till now, most of the time, you've had a very strict separation between your thumb and your fingers, or they've been playing exactly together. And so what we're looking for now is just a split timing. I think I just made up an exercise right here. What you could do, let's take this pattern. Let's syncopate every one of those finger notes. Just spend some time right there, because what that's doing is it's teaching your fingers to play first. Now you're getting both your first and your second finger are getting the feel of playing just a little bit ahead of that bass note. I think that's going to be a right-hand technique that you got to learn to feel and physically accomplish, and then work it in all together and get it in time.
Yeah, it sure does. We have a couple questions coming in here. This question is wondering if you can show it over
for
a D chord. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Remember your thumb pattern. You have two thumb patterns you can do with your D chord, but both of them start with that root note right there, open fourth string. And maybe you're just doing this simple one, or maybe you're doing the three-fingered one. So the exercise with the chords, remember with our D chord, we had to move our first two fingers down to the first two strings, right? Because now the third string has become an alternating thumb bass note. But the mechanics of the syncopation are still the same. The only thing that changed is what fingers you're playing on, okay? What strings you're playing on. Everything with a D chord moves to the next higher string because of our root note open fourth string.
All right, another question here. And this one is wondering, is it like doing a dotted 8th, 16th pattern?
Yeah, that's probably a more accurate representation of it. Yeah, I think in the tab it's called out as an eighth note, but what he's saying there is that adding the dotted eighth and a 16th, what you're doing is you're actually taking that eighth note and splitting it in half, and then so you've got a little longer pause on beat 2, it rings a little bit longer than one beat, so you're adding an extra bit of time onto that one, and then taking a little time off of this, because it's closer to beat 3. So yeah, probably a dotted eighth and a 16th would be the way to go. Technically, to represent that a little more accurately in tablature would probably be the way to go. But you get the idea. Because of the way you asked that question, you've got 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? 1, 2, and 3. It's closer to the 3 than an eighth note. So yeah, half of an eighth note.
Okay, here's one from Kathy. She's wondering about the homework for this week. Should she proceed even if last week's is not complete?
Actually, I think this is a great time to combine last week's with this week's. If you want to start working on this syncopation pattern, but use this as a reason and a time to use your metronome with it, set that metronome up to your thumb and get comfortable with that, and then start adding the chords and the syncopation in. And if you're doing it right, that thumb should stay with the metronome. So I would consider this doing last week and this week together without adding too much new material. That'd be a great idea.
And then we're getting a few questions. Wondering if you could maybe go over the tab just one more time, particularly for the counting of how it's counted out.
If you want to put up page 1 again. So line 1 is the thumb introduction, and then line 2 adds our chord on the 1 beat. So really those are just getting you ready for what's really coming on line 3, which is this. And you don't have to read straight down top through all these tabs. Remember, I've kind of set a precedent here of giving you one line at a time, something to practice over and over again. So line 3 is where you want to focus. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. And I'm saying and again. Remember, that's not truly an eighth note and. It's an and to give me the feeling of this. And 2. 1, 2, and 3, rather. I'll see what I can do. If I can submit a revised tab for this, I will, and I'll try doing that dotted eighth note. Because what I'd really rather see, what you're looking at in the tab, the first 2 beats in there are your thumb, right? The 1 beat is here, and the second beat is the thumb by itself. That chord is happening right before beat 3, and I'd rather see that tied there instead of an eighth note on the other one. I'll see if I can clean that up, but 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Remember that and is right before beat 3, okay? And if you listen, thumb's not changing at all. Chords are just examples. You could go back through, again, I recommend you go through all of your first position keys. So this example I gave you is key of E, which is E, A, and B7. You could do the same exact drill in the key of C, C, F, and G. You could do it in A and do A, D, and E. You could do it in what am I forgetting? G, which is G, C, and D. All right, so you can practice all your different keys down here just to rotate through the different chords. But this week the focus is on that rhythm. Da, 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 da. Okay, look for that syncopation in there and see if you can get the feel of that. And also do it with your fingers too, don't forget. We're caught up? Okay. As always, you can catch me for live Q&A on Tuesday nights on JamPlay. And if you have questions, follow-up questions on this lesson, I'll be there. Tuesday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Mountain Time. Or you can email me either through JamPlay or directly at jim@jimsguitar.com and let me know how you're doing with this and if you have more questions. Otherwise, I'll see you next week and we'll do more. Got some cool things coming next week.
We do have another question coming in here. And I am not familiar with this particular counting system, but someone was wondering about the nasal system. I don't even know what that is.
Can you put it up on the screen over here? Is it a question you can post?
Yeah. 1 second. Okay, well, he's unsure of the spelling. Okay, he's wondering in the Nashville system, although I don't think that's not really a counting system.
So, the Nashville numbering system,
yeah,
maybe?
that's more for chords. So,
well, the simple part of the Nashville numbering system is basically the idea that when you're in the key of C, C is your root chord. It's what key we're in. So we would refer to that as the 1 chord, okay? The other two chords, the other two major chords in the key of C are F and G. And if you listen to a C scale, C being number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, the F note is the 4th note in that scale. So they refer to the F chord as the 4 chord, okay? And then taking that one step further, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, C, D, E, F, G. The G is the 5th note in the C scale. So the G chord is the 5 chord. So we take this idea and say C is the 1 chord, F is the 4 chord, and G is the 5 chord. And so what you'll see on music that's written out in that system, they may not even say what key it's in. They'll just say 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, back to 1 chord. And so you would play that this way. 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. And the reason that's handy is because then let's say that you get a different singer and they can't sing this song in the key of C because the notes are too high and they want to move it to G. So now in the key of G, G now becomes our 1 chord, and that little pattern that I gave you, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. That's the same chord pattern. It would be the same song, but now it's in a different key, and because I used the numbering instead of the actual chords, you can instantly transpose that same sheet music into any key, as long as you know what those numbers are for each key. So that's not a bad way to start thinking about any of your keys. When I gave you the key of E, all right, if we were in the key of E, there's our 1 chord. The 4 chord is an A. The 5 chord is a B. And then back to the 1 chord, which is now an E. Okay, those are talking about intervals, basically relative to whatever key you're in. An interval of 4 that chord change, 1 to 4, that sounds the same in any key, it's just at a different pitch. And what this is good for ear training purposes is you should start listening to songs. You could start listening to songs, and regardless of what key they're in, you'll get to where you can hear, oh, that was a change from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, or that was a change from the 1 to the 5 and back to 1 again. And your ears will learn to hear what those intervals are, and it'll speed up your time to find chords in a song or memorize their patterns, regardless of what key they're in. Is that it? Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week then. And like I said, I'm going to start giving you some really fun, cool tools next week that will further enhance your fingerstyle foundations. Don't forget to use that metronome 15 minutes a day on each of these lessons, or more if you can. And do your homework. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.